You say you're depressed, and maybe you are. That word carries weight, and it should. Real depression is not something to dismiss, not something to simplify, and certainly not something to judge lightly. But there is also another truth, one that is quieter, less comfortable, and far more common. Many people are not trapped in clinical depression. They are trapped in chaos. They are overwhelmed, unfocused, overstimulated, and living without structure. And over time, that state begins to feel the same. There is a difference between a mind that is suffering from something deep and biological and a mind that has been neglected, misused, and left without direction. The problem is, from the inside, both can feel heavy, both can feel exhausting, both can make you question yourself. But one requires treatment and support, and the other requires discipline and responsibility. And if you confuse the two, you risk staying stuck in a cycle that you actually have the power to break. Look at your days honestly, without judgment, but without excuses. When do you wake up, and how do you wake up? Do you start your morning with intention, or do you reach for your phone and immediately surrender your attention? Do you sleep at a consistent time, or do you drift into the night with no structure, no boundary, no respect for your own energy? Your body follows patterns, and when those patterns are broken, your mind pays the price. Notice how you spend your hours. Constant scrolling, endless stimulation, short bursts of dopamine that leave you emptier than before. You are feeding your brain noise, not clarity. You are consuming without direction, without purpose, and then wondering why your thoughts feel scattered. The mind was not built to process this level of distraction. When you overload it, it doesn't become stronger. It becomes fatigued. Then there is movement, or the lack of it. Your body is designed to move, to exert effort, to release tension. But if your days are spent sitting, lying down, avoiding physical effort, that energy does not disappear. It turns inward. It becomes restlessness, frustration, and eventually a kind of dull heaviness that feels like something deeper is wrong. In many cases, nothing is wrong with your mind. It is simply underused, understimulated in the ways that actually matter. And then comes overthinking. When you have no structure, no plan, no direction, your mind fills the empty space. It replays conversations, imagines problems, creates scenarios that have no grounding in reality. You call it anxiety, you call it depression, but often it is just a lack of focus. A mind without a task will create its own chaos. None of this means your struggle is not real. It is real. The feeling is real. The exhaustion is real. But the cause is what matters, because the cause determines the solution. If your life lacks discipline, then your mind will reflect that. If your days have no structure, your thoughts will have no structure. If your actions are inconsistent, your emotions will be unstable. Discipline is not punishment. It is not restriction. It is a form of stability. It is a way of telling your mind and your body that there is order, that there is direction, that there is something to hold on to. Without it, everything becomes unpredictable, and the human mind does not do well in constant unpredictability. Start small, not because small is easy, but because small is sustainable. Wake up at the same time every day, even when you don't feel like it. Especially when you don't feel like it. That one decision begins to rebuild trust with yourself. It tells your mind that you are in control, not your mood. Move your body, even if it is simple. A walk, a few exercises, anything that reminds your system that it is alive and capable. Physical movement has a direct impact on your mental state. It grounds you in reality. It pulls you out of your head and into action. Limit your distractions, not completely, but intentionally. You don't need to eliminate everything. You need to regain control over it. When you decide when and how you engage with stimulation, you are no longer a passive consumer. You become active again, and that shift matters more than you think. Set small goals and complete them, not because they are impressive, but because they are completed. Completion builds momentum. Momentum builds confidence. And confidence slowly replaces that constant feeling of being stuck. Create routines, even simple ones. A structured morning, a consistent evening, a few fixed points in your day that do not change based on how you feel. Your emotions will fluctuate. Your routine should not. That consistency becomes a foundation, something stable in a world that often feels unstable. Over time, something changes. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but gradually. Your thoughts become clearer. Your energy becomes more consistent. That heavy, undefined feeling begins to lift, not because everything in your life is perfect, but because your internal world is no longer in chaos. There is a clear contrast between an undisciplined life and a structured one. In an undisciplined life, everything feels harder than it should. Simple tasks become overwhelming. Decisions feel exhausting. Your energy is low, your focus is scattered, and your sense of control is almost non-existent. You wake up without direction, move through the day without intention, and end it without satisfaction. In a structured life, the same world feels different. Not easier, but clearer. You know what you need to do. You have a direction, even if it is small. Your energy is not wasted on constant decision-making because your habits handle the basics. You feel a sense of control, not over everything, but over yourself. And that is enough to create stability. This is where personal responsibility becomes important, not as a form of blame, but as a form of power. If your habits are contributing to your current state, then changing those habits can change your state. That means you are not completely stuck. It means there is something within your control. Consistency matters more than intensity. You do not need to change your entire life overnight. You need to show up repeatedly in small ways that build over time. That is how discipline works. Quiet, steady, and often unnoticed in the moment, but powerful in the long run. Self-respect grows from this process. Not from what you say, not from what you intend, but from what you consistently do. When you begin to follow through on your own decisions, even the small ones, you start to trust yourself again. And that trust is the foundation of mental clarity. This is not about denying that real depression exists. It does. And it deserves understanding, support, and proper care. But before you label your experience, before you decide that something is fundamentally broken, take an honest look at what you are doing daily. Look at your sleep, your movement, your habits, your environment, your attention. Fix what is within your reach first. Because sometimes, what feels like something deeper is actually the result of something simpler. Not easy, but simple. A lack of structure, a lack of discipline, a lack of consistent action. And if that is the case, then the solution is not out of reach. It is built slowly, through choices that you control, repeated over time. So before you accept the label, question the lifestyle. Before you assume the worst, correct the basics. And give yourself the chance to see what changes when you bring order into your life. And understand this clearly. Discipline is not something you wait to feel ready for. It is something you practice precisely when you don't feel ready. If you rely on motivation, you will always be inconsistent. Because motivation is unstable by nature. It rises and falls based on mood, energy, and circumstances. Discipline, on the other hand, is neutral. It does not ask how you feel. It asks what needs to be done and whether you are willing to do it anyway. There will be days where your mind resists everything. Days where even the smallest task feels heavier than it should. In those moments, the goal is not perfection. The goal is not to perform at your highest level. The goal is simply to not break the pattern. To still wake up at your time. To still move your body, even if it's minimal. To still complete one small task that keeps the structure intact. Because once the structure breaks, the mind quickly returns to chaos. You don't need to solve your entire life. You need to stabilize your days. When your days are stable, your weeks begin to organize themselves. When your weeks are consistent, your direction becomes clearer, and clarity reduces that constant mental noise that you may have mistaken for something deeper. Pay attention to how your environment affects you, the space you live in, the content you consume, the people you surround yourself with. If everything around you encourages distraction, comfort, and avoidance, then your behavior will follow. Discipline is not only internal, it is also environmental. Sometimes improving your mental state begins with removing what constantly pulls you away from focus. There is also a level of honesty required that most people avoid. It is easier to say something is wrong with me than to say I am not doing what I know I should be doing. The first removes responsibility. The second demands change. And change is uncomfortable. It requires effort, repetition, and patience without immediate reward. But that discomfort is not a sign that something is wrong. It is a sign that you are rebuilding, that you are stepping out of a pattern that has been holding you in place. And in the beginning, that will always feel unnatural. Over time, the same actions that once felt difficult begin to feel normal. Waking up with intention no longer feels forced. Movement becomes part of your identity. Focus becomes easier to access. And most importantly, your mind becomes quieter. Not because life is silent, but because you are no longer feeding it constant disorder. You begin to notice something subtle but powerful. Your emotions stop controlling your actions as much as they used to. You still feel. You still have difficult moments, but they no longer define your entire day, because your structure holds you steady, even when your mood does not. This is where real control begins. Not control over every outcome, but control over your direction. And that is enough to change everything over time. So take a step back and ask yourself a simple but honest question. If someone else lived your exact routine, your exact habits, your exact daily structure, would they feel clear, focused, and stable? Or would they feel exactly the way you do right now? If the answer is the second, then you already know where to start. Fix the routine, build the discipline, create the structure, and then observe, patiently, what begins to change. Comment, I take control.